Wedding's still on, but I'm spending the last few nights before it with my ex for closure, my fiancée texted 10 days before our wedding. After 4 years together, she expected me to accept being the safe option. I didn't yell, didn't beg. I stayed silent for 9 days, left the marriage license unsigned, and let our planner read one printed page to 40 guests. I was 29, an engineer who built fraud detection systems for a living, which meant I spent my days looking for patterns that did not add up. Claire was 27, ran corporate events for a hospitality group, and could organize 300 people into a seated dinner without raising her voice. We had been together 4 years, engaged for 10 months, and the wedding was 10 days away when all of this started. She was not cruel. She was careful, in the way people are careful when they are protecting something they do not want looked at directly. 2 months before the wedding, I found out from a mutual friend that she had met Mark, her ex, for lunch downtown on a Tuesday she had told me was full of vendor calls. When I brought it up, she said it had been nothing, just 2 old friends catching up, and I let it go because I did not have anything except the name dropped by someone else. A few weeks later, at her parents' house, her mother made an offhand comment about Mark never treating Claire right, and Claire pushed back hard, defending him in front of the whole table, saying people deserved more credit than they got for who they used to be. I remember watching her do that and thinking it was strange how much energy she spent protecting someone who was supposed to belong to the past tense. I did not say anything that night either. I filed it away. The same way I filed away anomalies at work, certain that on their own they meant nothing. 10 days before the wedding, sitting at my kitchen table with the marriage license paperwork spread out in front of me, my phone buzzed once. The message was from Claire, sent at 11 in the morning while I was filling in the witness line on the marriage license. I picked up my phone, read it once, and read it again before I understood what I was looking at. Wedding's still on, but I'm spending the last few nights before with my ex for closure, it said, followed by a screenshot of a flight confirmation, 2 tickets, dated 9 days out, the day before the rehearsal dinner. I called her. She picked up on the second ring, her voice already steady, already rehearsed, like she had been waiting for this exact conversation. I need you to actually explain this to me, I said. Explain what? She said. I told you, it's closure. I don't want to walk into our wedding with something unfinished hanging over me. I asked her when she had booked the flights. There was a pause before she answered. A couple weeks ago, she said. I wanted it settled before everything got busy. I sat with that for a second, doing the math in my head, because a couple of weeks ago was before she had even said Mark's name to me again. So this was already planned, I said. And you were going to tell me 10 days out. Her voice shifted, defensive now, but not unsteady. I didn't want to make it a whole thing, she said. I just wanted to handle it quietly and move forward as us. Something in me went quiet right then, the way it does when a system flags an error that has been running clean for too long to be an accident. I was not raising my voice. I was not crying. I was looking at a screenshot of 2 plane tickets and doing arithmetic on exactly how long she had been planning to be somewhere else 3 nights before our wedding. I'm not spending 9 days before our wedding pretending I don't know where you'll be, I said, and I need you to think carefully about how you answer the next thing I ask. She exhaled hard into the phone. You're being dramatic, she said. I'm trying to start our marriage without baggage, and you're acting like I planned an affair. It was, in its own way, a sentence I understood. People do carry unfinished business into rooms they are not supposed to bring it into. That did not change what she had actually decided to do about it, in secret, 9 days before our wedding. I told her I needed to think, hung up, and sat at the table with the marriage license still spread out in front of me, the pin still uncapped. I did not throw anything. I did not call anyone yet. I picked up my phone, saved the screenshot to a folder, and started writing down a timeline of dates. I went back through old messages, the lunch with Mark, she had called nothing, the night at her parents' house, and laid them next to the flight confirmation until the pattern stopped looking like a coincidence and started looking like a decision made weeks ago and kept from me on purpose. I already had a meeting on the calendar for the next morning with Linda, the wedding planner we had hired 5 months earlier to run the rehearsal dinner and the reception. It had nothing to do with any of this. We were supposed to finalize the seating chart and confirm the order of toasts, things scheduled weeks before Claire's text ever arrived. Linda had been doing this work for 16 years, and she ran her meetings like someone who had stopped being surprised by families a long time ago. We sat at her office table going through the floor plan, and about 10 minutes in she stopped talking, looked at me, and set her pen down. You look like a man who got bad news and is still deciding what to do with it, she said. Most of my clients can't hide that from me. You're the first one who's tried, I told her. Not everything, just the flight screenshot and the date, 9 days out. The night before the rehearsal dinner, she was contracted to run. She did not react the way I expected. She did not gasp or offer sympathy. She pulled out the contract we had signed 5 months earlier and pointed to a clause about accurate event information being disclosed to all parties involved. A clause she said existed for situations exactly like this one. I've done this 16 years, she said, closing the folder. I don't cancel contracts over feelings. I cancel them over facts. I asked Linda to change nothing on the surface. Keep the rehearsal dinner exactly as planned, the same seating chart, the same order of events, so Claire would have no reason to suspect anything before that night. The only adjustment was to the opening of the program, the few minutes before toasts began, which Linda always ran herself from a small podium near the entrance. For the next 9 days, I went to work, fitted my suit, answered Claire's text the way I always had, and said nothing about the flights sitting in a folder on my phone. I kept the marriage license folded in my desk drawer, unsigned, and checked the date on it more than I checked my phone. People who knew me would have said I seemed normal, maybe a little quiet, and they would have been right, because there was nothing left in me that needed saying out loud yet. I did not want the wedding to end because of something I broke in front of her. I wanted it to end because of something she had already built, standing in a room full of people who had bought plane tickets to watch her get married. The rehearsal dinner was held on a Friday evening at a private event space attached to a downtown hotel, the kind of room with a wall of windows looking out over a courtyard strung with lights, and a long table down the center set with white linen and handwritten place cards. 40 people were seated by 7 o'clock, family on one side, the wedding party on the other, a small podium with a microphone standing near the entrance where Linda always opened the evening. Claire sat at the head of the table between her mother and her maid of honor, Hannah, exactly the spot that put every set of eyes in the room on her without anyone having to try. I sat 2 seats down, my plate untouched, watching Linda step away from the bar with a folder under her arm and start walking toward the podium. Linda reached the podium in a charcoal blazer, her heels even and unhurried against the hardwood floor, the folder held flat against her side like something she had carried into 100 rooms before this one. She did not rush. The moment she lifted the microphone off its stand, the low hum of 40 conversations dropped by half, the way a room does when it senses, before it knows, that something has shifted. On her way from the bar, one of the servers stepped into her path with a tray of wine glasses, angling toward the head table. Linda paused just long enough to say, after this, not during, and step around him without losing her pace. It was 3 seconds, nothing more, but it was enough for 2 or 3 guests near the bar to stop talking and turn to see where she was walking next. Claire's face went through 3 distinct stages before anyone else in that room understood what was happening. First, the easy half-smile of someone expecting a standard welcome speech, her hand already drifting toward her water glass. Then, as Linda said the words, "Before we begin toasts, there's something about tonight's schedule I need to clarify for everyone here." Claire's smile thinned into a tight, searching look, her eyes flicking toward me for the first time all evening. By the time Linda opened the folder and lifted out a single printed page, Claire's face had gone completely still, the color draining out of it fast enough that her mother turned to look at her before looking at Linda. "I was contracted 5 months ago to run an honest event for 2 people, Linda said, her voice even, carrying without being raised. Part of that contract means I don't stand up here and pretend 9 days from now doesn't include a trip neither family was told about." She held up the page, a flight confirmation printed clean across it, 2 names, 2 tickets, a date 1 night before this very dinner had been scheduled. Claire stood up so fast her chair scraped backward against the floor. "This is not something you get to bring up here," she said, her voice cracking on the last word. I stayed seated, my hands flat on the table, and said the only thing I had decided in advance to say all week. "It's something everyone at this table has a right to know, since they bought plane tickets to come watch us get married." Across the table, Claire's mother pressed her napkin against her mouth without a word, and Hannah, seated beside Claire, slowly slid her chair 6 inches away from her, the kind of small physical retreat a person makes without deciding to make it. Linda did not raise her voice for what came next. She read the message aloud, the exact words from Claire's own text, the ones about the trip and the reason she had given for needing it before our wedding. She was not doing it out of cruelty. The disclosure clause in her contract existed for exactly this, and once she finished reading it, Claire no longer had any version of the story left to control. Every person at that table had heard it directly, in Claire's own words, before Claire ever opened her mouth to explain herself. "You don't get to do this to me in front of my family," Claire said, her voice shaking now, looking from Linda to me and back again. Nobody at the table answered her. Her father, 2 seats down, set down his fork without picking it back up. Two of Claire's coworkers near the far end of the table exchanged a quick glance and then looked down at their plates, the kind of small motion people make when they want no part of being seen reacting. The silence that followed was not empty. It was 40 people deciding, in real time, which version of the evening they now believed. Claire turned toward her mother, looking for something, an objection, a defense, anything. Her mother did not move from her chair. She kept her eyes on the printed page still in Linda's hand, her jaw set in a way I had never seen on her before that night. Claire's hand found the back of her chair and gripped it, her knuckles whitening against the wood, the only part of her still moving in a room that had otherwise gone almost completely still. The last image of the night was Claire standing at the head of the table, the wine glass still in her hand, untouched, looking around at 40 faces that had all, in the space of about 90 seconds, stopped being on her side. She did not say anything else. She set the glass down on the white tablecloth hard enough that it rang against her water glass, turned, and walked out of the room alone. 2 days later, Hannah called me. She had stayed behind that night to help Claire's mother get her to the car, and she wanted me to hear what happened after I had already left the room. Claire had cried for almost half an hour in the hotel lobby, she said, and her mother had not said a single word to her on the drive home. She kept asking everyone if they thought she was a bad person, Hannah said. Nobody really answered her. I sat with the phone against my ear for a moment before I said anything back. "I don't feel good about it," I said, "but I don't feel bad either. I just feel like it's finally true." That was the whole of it. No triumph, nothing to celebrate, just the flat, quiet sense that the room now matched what had actually been happening for 9 days. After we hung up, I called the venue we had originally booked for the wedding itself and asked what the cancellation policy looked like. I called my own family to let them know the date was no longer happening. By the end of that week, I had a list of people to notify and a folder of receipts to sort through. And for the first time in 10 days, I was not waiting for anything. 3 days after the rehearsal dinner, Claire sent a long email to my work address, not my personal one, which I noticed before I even opened it. It opened with an apology, 2 paragraphs of it, and then shifted into an explanation of why she had needed the trip, almost word for word what she had told me on the phone. By the final paragraph, it had turned, accusing me of staging a public spectacle instead of handling things privately, like a man, between the two of us. I did not respond. 2 days after that, she called Linda directly and asked her to remove the disclosure clause from the contract record, framing it as a misunderstanding that had been blown out of proportion in the moment. Linda told her no, and when Claire pushed harder, accusing her of taking sides in something that was not her business, Linda did something Claire had not anticipated. She forwarded the entire email exchange to both families, citing her own professional obligation to protect her name from being misrepresented in a dispute she had only been contracted to document, not create. That single move did more damage to Claire's position than the rehearsal dinner itself had. Where the dinner had been one night and one room, the forwarded emails reached people who had not been there, written in Claire's own words days after the fact, still defending the decision rather than the harm it had caused. Her cousin texted me directly to say she had read the whole thread and could not understand what Claire thought she was apologizing for. By the second week, it was clear Claire still believed the actual offense had been getting caught, not the 9 days of silence that came before it. Nobody who read those emails came away thinking otherwise. It was Hannah who told me, almost a month later, over coffee she had asked to set up herself. She still talked to Claire occasionally, mostly out of old habit, and she said she wanted me to hear the next part from her rather than secondhand through someone else. She told me Mark had stopped answering Claire's calls about 2 weeks after the rehearsal dinner. Claire had reached out to him afterward, Hannah said, expecting some kind of support, maybe even more than that, now that the wedding was gone. Instead, Mark had gone quiet for several days, and when he finally responded, it was one message, short, telling her he thought the trip had been about something else entirely on his end, and that he was not interested in being anyone's next decision. She showed me the message, Hannah said, turning her coffee cup slowly on the table. She wanted me to tell her it wasn't what it sounded like. I did not say anything for a moment. I was thinking about the flight confirmation, 2 tickets, booked weeks in advance, and the version of events where that trip had been about finishing something rather than starting it. Hannah kept talking, telling me Claire had tried calling Mark twice more after that message, and that both calls had gone straight to voicemail, the kind of silence that does not come with an explanation attached to it. She blocked herself out of both situations at the same time, Hannah said. Not unkindly, just stating it the way a fact gets stated when nobody is trying to make a point with it. I did not need her to make the point. I just nodded, finished my coffee, and asked her how her own week had been instead. I moved into a smaller apartment near the office, the kind of place with one window that faced a brick wall and just enough room for a bed, a desk, and not much else. On a Tuesday night about 6 weeks after everything, I stood at the stove eating noodles straight out of the pot, not bothering with a bowl, watching half of a movie I had already seen before and barely paying attention to. Nobody texted to ask if I had picked out a boutonniere. Nobody needed me to confirm a final headcount with a caterer by Friday. The phone sat face down on the counter the entire time, not because I was avoiding anything, but because there was simply nothing on it that needed checking anymore. I ate standing up, leaning against the counter, and at some point I realized I had eaten almost the whole pot without once looking at the clock. There was no significance to any of it. It was just a Tuesday, a pot of noodles, and a version of my evening that 10 weeks earlier would have looked nothing like this. Claire had chosen to keep a door open with Mark instead of closing it before our wedding, and 3 months later, that door closed on her from the other side, permanently, in a way she had no part in deciding. I heard the rest of it from Hannah, over the same coffee shop table we had used before, the two of us meeting now without it needing an excuse. She had gone to see Claire the week before, she said, mostly to check in, and what she found surprised her more than she expected it to. Claire was living alone in the apartment she and I had once planned to leave together. Hannah said the box of wedding invitations that had never been sent was still sitting in the corner of the living room, unopened, the rubber band around it starting to perish from sitting that long. The wedding dress was still there too, hanging in its plastic garment bag on the back of the closet door, because Claire had not been able to bring herself to return it before the store's window for refunds had closed. I asked her if she was doing okay, Hannah said, and she just kind of laughed, but not the funny kind. She said Claire had been quiet for a while after that, looking at the box of invitations rather than at Hannah, before she finally said the one thing that stuck with Hannah enough to repeat it word for word 3 months later. I thought I was keeping a backup, Claire had told her. Turns out I just lost both. Hannah said it plainly, without dressing it up, the way she had told me everything else since the rehearsal dinner. She was not trying to make me feel anything in particular. She was just telling me what she had seen, the dress in its bag, the invitations in their box, and the one sentence Claire had said out loud to someone other than herself. I did not say much back. I asked Hannah if she wanted another coffee, and while she went up to order it, I sat there for a second, not triumphant, not sad, well, just quiet, in the specific way a person goes quiet after finally setting down something heavy they had been carrying for 3 months without realizing how much it weighed. Outside the window, a delivery truck idled at the curb, and somewhere behind the counter a espresso machine hissed once and went silent again. Ordinary sounds that had no idea what they were sitting beside. I still live in the small apartment near the office. I moved the kitchen table against the wall a few months ago to make room for a bike I bought on a whim, and most mornings now I ride it the long way to work instead of taking the train. I do not check my phone first thing anymore. There is nothing on it counting down to anything. I do not think about Claire often, and when I do, it is not with anger, just a kind of distance, the way you think about weather from a city you used to live in. I never signed that marriage license. It is still folded in a drawer somewhere, in a box I have not gotten around to unpacking. I am not wiser than I was 10 days before that wedding. I do not have some lesson I carry around now, ready to hand to the next person who asks. I am simply not sharing my future with anyone who keeps an old door open, and I am not the same as someone who learned that the hard way. I am just the version of myself who no longer has to wonder.